Gen Z in today's workplace. This is not a topic that there's been nothing shared about. There's lots of material out there. We haven't found a lot about, there is a lot about how managers and leaders should accommodate and deal with Gen Z as they enter. There's not a lot that we've been able to find about how Gen Z, like tips and tricks for Gen Z for dealing with us older generation people in the workforce. So that's what we're talking about today. Hello and welcome to the M Squared Leadership Conversation, a space where we talk honestly about the real challenges leaders face and what it actually takes to lead well in the real world that we all live in. I'm Michael Hales.
And I'm Michelle Hales.
Welcome in. We're glad you're with us. So this is part 2 of a conversation that we started last time, Michelle, and we, in preparing for that episode, we had so much material, and you and I get so passionate as we're talking about these things that we just kind of ran out of time and had to cut that short. So we wanted to come back and finish because I think we still have some important things to share on this topic.
Sure.
So last time we talked about how the different generations that are in the workforce now were shaped by different realities. We grew up differently, and the way we approached work and life are very different. And so we kind of unpacked that a little bit. Now we want to kind of jump into some of the things maybe that some of the misconceptions that Gen Z may have about us Gen Xers and us boomers in the workforce and what makes us tick. So let's dive into that.
Let's do it. So yes, sometimes it could be that Gen Z could be getting a few things wrong about us.
Okay.
They could be making some assumptions, which we all do.
We all do it.
We do. It's common that you look at someone, you size them up, you make some assumptions based on all different things, all the information that is filtered into your brain.
So let's stop right there and kind of, I've got the benefit of knowing where we're going in a lot of these conversations, and so I'm going to tip off our viewers. Where we're going with this is the better approach is instead of going in, assessing a situation, making a decision and going with it, to approach it with an attitude of curiosity rather than prejudging.
Curiosity.
Okay.
Ask questions, be inquisitive, think, there's something about you that I don't know. We naturally want to, and we do, tell ourselves stories.
We think we know. We've got good, our 5 senses, and we use those to assess the world that we operate in, and we draw conclusions based on that, and they're often wrong.
They are. So even if you're telling yourself a story, and some of the facts are true in that story, that doesn't make you have a good, clear picture of what's really going on.
Yeah.
And you can always change the story that you're telling yourself.
Yes.
That's the really cool thing. So as we're looking at this today, just maybe think of a way that you could frame someone in a different light.
Okay.
Maybe. So one of the things that Gen Z could be getting wrong is mistaking our formality for like a coldness. So formality for us, we don't mean to be, but we're conditioned by the way that we were trained, how the people that were in charge when we entered the workforce, the norms, the values that were in place.
We're shaped by those things.
We're shaped by those
Inevitably,
things.
every generation is.
And there's just no doubt that we're closer to, the generations that expected things to be a certain way. There were systems and processes for everything, and my goodness, you needed to follow those. And to some degree, you do have to appreciate systems and processes. That's what keeps order and prevents chaos from running amok in the workplace. But, we can, and we have, I think, casual Fridays used to never be a thing. Now during our work day, that was a big deal because on casual Fridays, you were allowed to wear jeans or denim to work when you normally before then you couldn't. And now some places, denim is not distinguished in any certain way. It can be worn or whatever. But there's still, we hold on to some of that formality and we, casting it back on what we do, how we might judge or perceive Gen Z or a younger generation coming in, we perceive people that don't follow the same formalities that we've had. We perceive them as being too loose and
too casual
and, not professional enough, where we could be perceived as being cold and, all zipped up and, closed up kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's important what you just said, because any observation that one person from a particular generation might make about another generation, there's going to be some difference there. And if I perceive the way somebody else does something as a little bit strange, then almost certainly you could always flip that lens, and they probably perceive the way I do it as a little bit strange and unusual. And neither one is right.
Right. And, when we talk about this out loud and we say these words, it's common sense. And we get it. Anybody listening to this is probably going, right, we need to understand you, you need to understand me.
But how easy is it to just rush right past that in real life?
When we get in the situations and our feelings get involved.
In the heat of the moment.
It's like, that feels cold. That feels, whatever it may be.
Overly formal.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right, and then another mistake that Gen Z could potentially make is mistaking our caution for closed-mindedness. So we are naturally, and we're the leaders now. Gen X for most part, we're upper management. And we have a lot of weight on our shoulders.
A lot of responsibility.
So even though a really good idea may come across our desk or come to the table for discussions and brainstorming time, that does not mean we just run off with a good idea and put it into action right away. And that can feel a little bit like rejection. It can feel like closed-mindedness, that kind of thing. But we have to be a little bit cautious.
So more often, it's not a matter of they don't like my idea or they don't think I'm bringing value or anything like that. It's more of, let's take this slow, put a little thought and consideration into it, and then maybe if it passes all the smell tests and whatever, maybe we can move forward with it.
I mean, you think about, how is it going to affect every area? Because there's the ripple effect of any decision that you put into motion or whatever. And it's our job to think about that.
Right.
So just a quick little lesson: in the first 40 years of your life, there's fluid intelligence.
Okay.
And that's where you can be really innovative. That's where you are usually really innovative. You're not averse to risk taking and that sort of thing. And the second half 40 years of your life is more crystallized intelligence. That's like, I've learned a thing or two and now it's kind of set in stone a little bit. And you are more risk averse.
So that makes perfect sense in the context of what we're talking about, because the under 40 crowd will include the Gen Zs who are very, let's do this, let's think outside the box, let's do all these things. And the over 40 crowd, our generation, the Gen Xers and the boomers who are now in the executive and leadership positions, we're already kind of set in our ways, and there's legitimate physiological reasons for that, is what I'm hearing you say. So it's another difference that it is not necessarily, neither one is good nor bad.
Well, we need both of them.
Yes.
We need big ideas, big, bright, beautiful things coming our way that can just be out there, and that's what the younger crowd is for. That's what we need them. We need their good, sharp brains that aren't stuck yet. You will be one day, but right now you're not. So go give those ideas.
But we
then
need
they
it
have to
balanced,
be
too.
measured. Yes, they have to be brought back into a reality, a way, a mode that they can be worked out well, for everyone involved, kind of thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, what
And
else?
then another thing is mistaking slower trust for disrespect. So this is one where our generation was very much, and we were taught, you earn your trust around here.
Yeah.
You don't just come in and we trust you 100%. You got to earn it, and
Very
that
much
can
so.
that can feel like you don't respect me. You don't respect me as a person. You don't respect what I'm bringing to the table. You don't respect the knowledge that I have. You don't respect the education I have. You could go on and on. It feels very disrespectful.
But what I hear you saying is choose to interpret that not as disrespect, because I don't think it's intended as disrespect, but just look at it as that kind of idea of paying one's dues.
And building a relationship. You don't necessarily marry the first person that you go on a date with.
True.
And so you want to build a relationship with them before you take it to the next step and the next step. You build that trust, that chemistry, knowing where people's strengths and weaknesses are they going to complement each other? That's the same thing in the workplace, really. It's like a marrying of people, and you have to build that relationship and build that trust.
So not jumping straight into some close, intimate, trusting relationship is not necessarily disrespect. It's just giving space for the process of trust to be built.
I don't think trust is just built overnight. I think there's a level of respect that every individual should be given.
Right.
That's humanity in general. And you hired this person, so you need to trust them to a certain degree, and we probably could do a little better about things.
Yes.
But what Gen Z might can understand is that we've hired people that have told us one thing. And they promised one thing with their credentials and their resume, and it didn't work out in the long run. We've been burnt many times.
Okay.
So just understanding where we're coming from, that trust kind of has to be built. And
Right.
It's not that you have to hang around X number of years before you earn my trust, but building the relationship. It'll always go back to the relationship.
Yeah.
Every single thing.
Love it.
And then mistaking skepticism for hostility.
Okay.
So sometimes our generation, our Gen X, you have to remember that we grew up when the Vietnam War hit, and our parents were raising us during that time. And we were hearing a lot about this was a long war where a lot of our soldiers were being forced to go, and not good results. We basically, lost that war, and there was so much distrust that started with. It wasn't like World War II where there was a clear-cut enemy
Right.
that we had to, dismantle.
Right.
Vietnam War was very confusing, and we no longer trusted our government. We couldn't trust what our government was doing, and we started to become skeptical. So that was the start, and that's kind of the history for us. And we naturally have a little bit of a built-in skepticism that has continued all of our life. We endure things, and we're very tolerant of things, but we can smell when things are not quite right.
Our senses are heightened.
And Gen Z, I'm going to tell you, I think this is something we have in common with them. I think they really detect when people are not true, genuine, and authentic.
Yes.
And But our skepticism is we've seen things that have been put in place that have failed, and Gen Z has too. All the banks that failed and bailouts that had to happen. So to make this point, try to wrap it up a little bit. We're not being hostile when we stop to question maybe the validity of something. Where did that source come from?
Right.
That sort of thing. That's not trying to be hostile and set you back. We just have to trust but verify.
It's our skepticism in practice.
Absolutely. And then one more.
Okay.
Mistaking our institutional memory for resistance.
Okay.
Okay. And this is where we've just been around long enough that we know that we're using this software, this process, we're doing it this way. We are doing it that way because we've been here and we've come on this journey. We know how it was derived.
We have the context.
We have the context for why we're doing things the way that we are. And sometimes we'll be like, no, we cannot do it X way because we know. We did X and X happened. Now, here's the thing with us. Sometimes the older generations will get stuck. We tried that and it didn't work. We'll lock in on something and we can be, a little gross with that, to be honest.
A little closed-minded sometimes.
It is. Because now we're in a new environment. We've got a new technology. It's a different economy. It's different things have changed, and Gen Z is trying to help us know that, hey, we might can. But again, if we'll go back to that relationship and what you started off with is saying, why? Why are we doing it that way?
Right.
Why are we using this software? Why are we, using this process?
Yeah.
Then we can understand that it's not just because we're resistant to new ideas or somebody from a different generation having the good idea at the table. It's not necessarily that. It is really just where we're coming from. And also just remember, why are you doing that? Ask the question, be curious, and build that relationship.
And again, I know what you're saying. It's not to justify that the way things are is the right way. It's not that. But the way things are is the way things are. And there's usually a reason behind that.
Yeah.
And the more we can get curious about understanding what those reasons are, the better chances we have to, A, be able to deal effectively with the situation that we're in, and B, bring about some positive, constructive change in that situation if it's not all it needs to be.
Absolutely. And, every time, it used to be weird, like we would go on a field trip or a youth trip or this, that, or the other, and they would have a set of rules that you had to follow. And sometimes there would just be like a crazy rule. Like, you can't wear a red shirt by the lake at whatever time at 12:30 at night. Well, that's because something weird happened. Somebody did something, or you read on the back of the can, do not spray the hairspray directly into your mouth or your eyes, And you're like, why would you say that? Those are there for reasons, because something has happened, lawsuits, tragedy, whatever may have happened, that those have to be in place. And here's the thing to remember. I think it's important to know that just because somebody is difficult or rubs you the wrong way and they come off as maybe cold or closed-minded or disrespectful or hostile or resistant, that's sometimes difficult to deal with, but that doesn't necessarily make them a toxic person. We're quick to label, oh, they're so toxic.
We hear that a lot, yeah.
Just be careful with that. That's a pretty powerful word to throw around. Toxic means it's ruining everything everywhere, and there's nothing you can do. There's no, anti-venom cure or whatever for it. But there is something you can do for these things if you feel that way. And that's be curious, ask questions, have conversations, build a relationship.
Yeah, and one final thing on this I think is important is, we all, when we encounter somebody who is different from us in some way, like a generational difference or a cultural difference or sometimes or something like that, we tend to look at that difference as a negative. And it's tempting. We all do that. We're all prone to do that. But if we, instead of looking at those differences in a least charitable way
Yes.
possible, if we can get curious and if we can say, oh, there's a difference here, maybe they are enlightened in some way that I need to become enlightened. Maybe they have something that I can learn. Maybe they have something that they can share. I think that will really benefit us, not only for us older generations having that kind of spirit of generosity toward Gen Z, but vice versa as well. We need their understanding just as much as they need ours.
And see what different story you can tell yourself about that person.
That's so good. I love it. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what our differences are and maybe some things that Gen Z might benefit from understanding about us older generations. Now let's make it practical. What might they start to do to get, good, productive, positive outcomes in the workplace in dealing with us?
I'll try to go quickly through these and not expound on them too much. But learn the communication preferences of the people that you work with.
Okay.
Every time I think about this, I think about my dad. And, just as sure as I send him a text, he's going to call me. And he doesn't like to do
So you've
text.
established your preference. I would like to have a text message exchange with you, Dad.
Yeah.
But he doesn't get it and he calls.
Yeah. And, I'm at the point where if I can call him, that's simple enough for me to do. I know how to use the phone. It's not hurting me. Sure, it might be a little more inconvenient for me right now. I might have to get up and step outside to make the phone call to him or whatever, rather than sit here at my desk and do the little text message with him. But that's what he prefers. He doesn't text well, and he feels like we don't get the true meaning, or he probably wants to tell me something.
And in fairness, he's got a point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I'm taking away from this is don't always insist on having it be my way.
Yeah.
Do it. If I can come to you and do it your way sometimes, then maybe I should
If you
do
know that there's, you might prefer to communicate by instant messenger in the office, but there's just this one person who needs a formal email every time. Got to do the whole email and wait for it to, go through the system. Just be mindful of that. Sometimes we can make little concessions that show each other respect and that we see you and we hear you. And that, again, goes back to just building that relationship.
I love it.
Okay, and then the other one is show reliability before demanding autonomy.
So we all want autonomy. We want to be able to call our own shots. But what I'm hearing you say is there may be something that we need to demonstrate. We need to prove. Need to kind of, earn that.
It's frustrating because, we get comments all the time that say that Gen Z really hates that pay your dues. They've paid their dues in other ways, and I completely respect that and get that. I still just have to go back to building that relationship. Okay. So a little bit of reliability definitely needs to be demonstrated before we're able as leaders to completely turn over complete autonomy for a big project, something that's high stakes. It's really important that we know that somebody can really fulfill their obligations.
And that's much less of a personal thing than it is a larger, scope of responsibility thing for a leader in that kind of senior position. There's more than just this one person-to-person relationship to be considered here. There's a lot more moving parts than that.
And as your reliability really can be built pretty quickly. I think sometimes we think that we equate, you don't think I'm reliable because I haven't been here for 2 years. You can build reliability pretty quickly.
Oh, that's good.
And reliability is just doing what you said you would do, being where you were supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there. It's simple.
About more about how you conduct yourself day to day than about earning tenure or something.
Absolutely. And sometimes you do have to kind of play the game. If they are wanting to know that you're producing so many widgets, then produce your widgets. If they're requesting that you not have a full movie going while you're at work, maybe just have, just be listening to music or something like that.
Yeah.
Do those kinds of things.
One thing that's coming through for me is acknowledge that there is a game and play the game a little bit. You don't maybe have to love it, but
you have to remember, I know I've heard it said by a Gen Z cusper very close to me that I don't want to play the game. I don't like that there's a game that you have to play. I just want to show up and people respect me for who I am and let me do my job. And wouldn't it be wonderful if it
would
was
be
that
fantastic.
simple? But no matter where you go, whether it's the military or the government, private sector, nonprofit, there's a system.
Yeah.
There's a system that's in place because of the past of that organization. And there are certain things that you're going to have to do. Ask, what do you really want? And then do what it takes to get what you want. Now, as you move through to getting what you want, change the culture when you can.
Yes.
So if you don't like the culture, you can't change the culture by
Railing
being
against
a rebel.
Yeah.
Yes. You're going to have to get into the system, learn it, understand it from the ground up, and then you can change the culture.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let's move on. So ask questions before challenging legacy systems. This is pretty simple, but just knowing, why are we using this system?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that already.
Yeah, and don't be just like, we need to change to this system. Say, what's making us use this? I know of another system that has these features, da 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 da. It could be, something like, well, we wanted to do those. There's this weird tax law that in our state that won't allow us to use that particular program. You never know. So again, curious, ask questions, build a relationship.
So this reminds me of a quote I heard from Mark Zuckerberg, the Facebook guy, who a few years ago he said, "Move fast and break things." And I think that applies here because we're not saying that no legacy system ever needs to be challenged.
Right.
Some things need to be broken up because
For sure.
they're not working anymore. There's a better way. But if the only thing you have, the only trick you have is you got a hammer and you're going around breaking things, some things don't need to be broken. And if you're not discerning about when to fight that battle and when to, I see there's something more here than just something old that needs to be done away with. You're going to be more effective if you have some discernment about those things. For sure,
absolutely. Not everything deserves to be broken.
Okay.
All right, and then translate your values into language older leaders can hear. So what that kind of looks like is making sure that, and Gen Z does such a good job of this. I think they're really building their values into everything that they do.
Yes,
they're
very
purpose.
value-driven.
And I love that, and that's really cool. We need more of that. People are going to work better, be more engaged. They're going to make the world a better place because of that. But sometimes what you're saying doesn't always translate to us because we hear the words that you're saying, but because of where we come from, we don't get it.
Yeah, and words meaning changes over time.
For sure. Just linguistically, that is true, but also just we don't get like where you're coming from sometimes. Like we don't get why you value that. So say more.
Right.
Be willing to expound on it. Be willing to have that conversation.
Pay close attention to the encoding and decoding part of the communication process and the noise in between. So you may have to be a little more when dealing with somebody from our older generations. You may have to be a little more particular about how you frame your message and the way you convey it and the words that you use to make sure that it lands in a way that your receiver can understand it.
Yeah. And that noise in the middle, that's a lot of like white noise, and it filters and it acts as the filter, the person who's decoding the information. It's filtered through that, their white noise. And so that's how they were brought up, what that word means to them, the experiences they've had with someone of that generation before that said these kinds of things and what that meant for that person. And so it's just really important that you, like you said, you're very careful with how, and to be on cue, like on the lookout for how is this person receiving that information. So you have a responsibility too, not just to, well, I told them what I meant.
Right.
Well,
that's good.
Make sure it landed like it was supposed to.
Make sure they got it like you intended it.
And, you know, there's all kinds of tips we can do on communication at some point. But, yeah, making sure that they really got what you said.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then distinguish between unhelpful traditions and hard-won wisdom.
Okay. We've talked about this a little bit already, too. There's
Yeah.
a reason why some things exist the way they do, and that's, you know, maybe not something that we want to tinker with right now. And there's good, sound reasons for that. And from us having been around the block a few times, we're here and lived through all of it, we have sometimes a better grasp of that than somebody who's new to the situation.
You know, I think about sometimes traditions they become a burden on the later generations to try to uphold those traditions. But traditions, some of them are good and worthy of being, you know, held up.
Perpetuated.
But some of them need that hammer.
Some of them need to go.
You know, they need to be broken up. But distinguish between that and good, just hard-earned wisdom.
Yeah.
Like, I've been through the fire, and this thing was purified. I now have a solid chunk of gold here that's just purified because it's been through the fire. It's been tested. It's been proven. I mean, you can shape that gold into something new, but this right here is like a value, something really important that doesn't need to be changed. And I think about those a lot of times. Hard-won wisdom is not changing technology and that kind of thing.
No, it's the more timeless
It
things.
is. It's the values. It's integrity, treating the customers right, how we're going to treat each other, the culture we're creating at our workplace.
Yeah, the way we interact with one another.
Yes. All right. And then build relationships, not just arguments. So sometimes, you know, we can build up this defense system. And I know that Gen Z sometimes, when there's an argument to be made, a debate to be had, you build up all the points and you get ready to go in and state all your points and do all the things. I've experienced this with some, and it's easy to do that in the comfort of your privacy, and you know, you can build up a really good argument and idea of why. But if you go in closed-minded and with just your argument and you don't hear, you're not going to win. You're not going to win influence. And ultimately, what you really want to have in the workplace is influence.
Yeah.
And to be a leader, to grow, to get the projects that you want. You know, you want to have some influence. And don't start with everything that you dislike. Start with what you're trying to understand. You will look like the smartest person in the room when you do this one little trick. And if you know you want to get what you want out of your job, just come to people like, I want to understand this. Not, here's my argument, here's why we should do X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. I've already looked at the situation. You know, I already got it figured out. That's never the wisest place to come from.
Coming in hot.
Yeah.
All right. So in all of this conversation, we've shared a lot, hopefully, of good insight for our Gen Z viewers to maybe get a little better handle on where we as the older generations are coming from. But let's be honest, we don't have it all figured out. We didn't get it all
Nope.
right. We still are working on ourselves, just like hopefully we all are.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that we older generations just, you know what, it is what it is. We need to own it.
Yeah.
And what's some true confessions we need to make?
We've not been super good at explaining expectations and setting clear expectations. And we just assume that people know them.
Ooh.
And so that's something that we need to work on. We need to mentor and not criticize. We need to, take on that hat of helping, connecting before we correct.
But it's
kind
so
of thing.
easy to criticize when we have a difference of opinion. We see things differently, and there's something where we don't see eye to eye with the other person. We quickly will judge that situation and rush in and, oh, here, this, instead of getting curious and instead of trying to add some value and trying to bridge that gap.
And just that little mindset of different is not bad,
Different
is
is
good.
not bad.
When you think I have a very different opinion from them. Good, yay. Now, find
Now we
out
can
why.
get somewhere.
Yes, now we can get somewhere.
Okay.
All right, and this kind of goes to that as well, difference between wrong and different. That was what we just talked about. We got ahead of ourselves a little bit, but yeah, different is not wrong. There's a million different ways to get to one result. There's like 400 different paths to get there. So when you have different opinions, and it doesn't matter, let somebody do their own path. Or if you need to collaborate, compromise on how you're going to get there. Right. So different is, and then we need to make sure that we are avoiding stereotypes. Remember this, we're dealing with individuals. When we're in the workplace, we're dealing with individuals. We're not dealing with Gen Z. We're dealing with, Jenna, who's in Gen Z. And we need to remember that, we should not put on them lazy, fragile, no grit, the things that are commonly said about Gen Z, which I advocate against. But I think there's something to be done there. We can grow. And even if some of these are slightly true, like if their work ethic is different, we just said different was not necessarily wrong.
Exactly.
If they're fragile in some areas, that's our opportunity to help strengthen them in some areas. Yeah. So those are some of the things that we probably could do a little better on, Mike.
Very good. So thank you, Michelle, for a great conversation. I know our goal here is not to make Gen Z into any sort of a carbon copy of us older generations.
Correct.
The goal is for us to understand these great young people who are coming into the workforce and work with them to build trust, to navigate our differences, to figure them out, and to build relationships, and to help groom them into the next generation of effective leaders in the workplace. So I want to thank you. I want to thank everybody for spending a few minutes with us today in the M Squared Leadership Conversation. Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to ask better questions. So until next time, stay curious, lead well, and let's keep the conversation going.
Bye, guys.